It's showtime.
Hey everyone, Django Fett here, hunting down games, comics, TV shows, movies, and more. And it's time to review Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So if you guys are not familiar with boss fight books, they are a kind of a Kickstarter funded program. Pretty much choose which video game they will do their research on. So in one of the last seasons, I think it was like a year or two ago, they did one of them being Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So what they do is interview a certain amount of creators out there, writers, developers, into creating how they create these games. So they do a bunch of interviews and they put all that research and time and that into their books. So this was my first time reading a boss fights book. So first thing off the bat, and you're gonna notice it right away, is the hideous cover and what looks to be an instrument saying light and dark on it. And this is one of the worst covers I have ever seen, and you'll see this abundantly clear in the boss fight books. They have a certain theme with the covers being really bad, but they have Shovel Knight being, a knight and different things, and this one's supposed to emulate light and dark, and it's a certain instrument that tests that. I think it's a spectrometer. I may be wrong on that. The covers are hideous, but they don't call it Star Wars. They don't call it, whatever video game, Resident Evil on here, or a Capcom, because they are just doing the creation or the, their research upon the video games itself. That's not directly the video game itself. So they're doing their research and then they're compiling it together and putting out these books. That's all it is. I'm someone who's curious about creation of games and what it takes, the concepts, the premises, what went down when it comes to creating these games. And being as someone who's a huge Knights of the Old Republic fan, I had to get this. And since this was on Humble Bundle way back in the day, I was curious about it. So I actually bought one of the initial Humble Bundle books, and I wanted to get it for the coupon code for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And upon getting it, I ended up getting the paperback and the text version. And when I first got this, I was like, this is pretty small at $15. This is only like 200 something pages? No, not even. This is 100 something pages. So extremely short. And probably not a great price, maybe $10, but I mean, because they're doing a lot of research and stuff, it's probably better than $20, to be honest. It's close to $20 if you add shipping to it. But I will say, if you're interested in getting this, I would recommend it. It is a really good read, and if you're a huge Knights of the Old Republic fan, you have to get this. And I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in getting this for now. And if you're interested in any of the boss fight books, I'm actually reading Silent Hill 2 right now, and so far it's really good. And they do a bunch of different projects. Shadow of the Colossus they just did, Red Dead Redemption. I really want to read that. And they're going to be doing some more in the future. They have these different seasons on Kickstarter, and if you fund them, and if you're a certain person that funds them, depending on what you fund towards, you can get to choose which title they can do with it for the next book. So if you're interested in video game, creations, the story concepts and stuff like that, then I would recommend you support this. So this book is written by Alex Kane. He is a journalist based in West Central Illinois, and he has written for Polygon, website of Rolling Stone, StarWars.com, Variety, and other publications. And this happens to be his first ever book. So this novel, and reading the back of it, features extensive new interviews with a host of coders, producers, writers, designers, and actors. Journalist Alex Kane weaves together an epic oral history of this classic game, from its roots in tabletop role-playing and comic books to its continued influence on big-screen Star Wars films. Whether you align with the light or dark side, you're invited to dive into this in-depth journey through one of the most beloved Star Wars titles of all time. So I'm going to give Star Wars Knights of the Republic Boss Fights book, eh? So I was short and sweet to this because I want to now get into these spoilers. So I really want to dive in head first into this. So you're going to be seeing a bunch of Knights of the Republic footage in the background as I'm going to be mentioning with this book. So chapter by chapter, I'm going to go with the first chapter with the author's notes. And right away, I thought this was not something that I liked initially from the writer, and I thought it was a little bit of a bias, but he said that Legends comics, tie-in novels, and video games were never canonical texts in Lucas's eyes. They have and have always been secondary affairs at best. And this is simply not true. Maybe in the end, Lucas didn't want anything to do with Legends after Episode 3, but before that time, Lucasfilm actually had control over the EU and authors in the EU. And they had limits in what they can do and cannot do, and Lucas himself would approve or eliminate those projects himself. Completely unaware of that whole process of what George Lucas did. In the second chapter, Crackle and Hum, Hayden Blackman first suggested the idea using the Wizards of the Coast and D20 rule set as the underlying system for the eventual game, Knights of the Republic. KOTOR used the Neverwinter Nights engine and rebuilt it to fit Star Wars and called the Odyssey engine, which would be used for KOTOR 2 and Jade Empire, which Jade Empire I still haven't played yet, unfortunately. With 2003, KOTOR also came with 12 other Star Wars games from 2001 to 2003, and had to follow Bethesda's 2002 masterpiece, Morrowind. Then we get to the next chapter, A More Civilized Age. Setting the game in a new era would give the writers creative freedom and would also allow for a non-linear story in which players' choices could influence the state of the galaxy without breaking the established continuity. LucasArts suggested setting the game 4,000 years before A New Hope. Then we get to the analog chapter, and Drew Karpyshyn was the one who actually designed the basics of how Pazaak, the game Pazaak, would work, the rules, and work with the programmers to implement that into the game. Every character's creation had an interesting story behind them in the initial stages. Casey Hudson got Jolie Bindo's name from an imaginary friend that he had when he was 3 years old that he invented. Malik aside, Gallagher's fingerprints are all over the art design in the game. He designed the vast majority of the characters as well as many costumes, props, and vehicles. And he actually didn't like Malik's design, but everyone disagreed. Some of BioWare's biggest contributors to EU lore arose from a desire to make full use of the blank slate nature of the Old Republic setting. In a sense, Revan is a redeemer from the dark, like Vader or Ulick. Let me get to the Vo chapter. Jennifer Hale voiced Bastilla Shan and had other Star Wars credits in X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, Force Commander, and Jedi Academy. She is quoted as saying, "I did a ton of games early on because frankly, a lot of actors didn't really want to do them because they were super demanding, and I just seemed to have a knack for it," end quote. The essence of the job, she says, is really to go out and have as big a life as I can and then to bring that experience into the booth. And I couldn't agree with that more. Bastilla, a young Jedi grappling with both the enormous depth of her powers and connection to Revan, is the emotional anchor of the game. Beyond Revan, Bastilla is the beating heart of KOTOR due to Hale's stellar work. Then this is when things get really interesting. BioWare had to jettison some of its content before launch, the form of a planet. Lead designer James Olin said, "We did cut an entire planet that we actually developed and built part of. This was a difficult decision because the art for it was being built by one of my best friends, Dean Anderson. Cutting it was painful, but it was a time thing. It was a gladiatorial world where the player was going through sort of a Planet Hulk style plot. The player would get stuck fighting their way up through the ranks until they won the tournament and escaped off-world. But that was too much in the time we had, so it got cut. Which sucks, because that sounds amazing." The modding community has made several efforts to restore some of it, but it's mostly fan fiction and not much to go by. But still interesting to see what people can work with and do with. And something that I have to look into myself, I actually have to check out if there is a mod for it in the first place. And I actually have to dive into this and check this out if this is really true, and check out if this mod really works. According to writer David Gator, the quest lines were mostly finished when the design to cut the planet was made. Slaharion was under the influence of Sundra the Hutt, who can be seen in Marvel's Star Wars number 10. But that's canon and not legends. But it is interesting because Luke is placed in the event on Nar Shaddaa to die for the amusement of the Hutt. An interesting fact was Yuthara Ban, the Dark Jedi Master on Korriban, who wanted to train and sponsor Revan in the Sith Academy, was born on this planet, Slaharion. And when you talk to her more, she actually kills a Hutt who owned her and escaped the planet herself. Crunch time was engaged as the PC release got cleared towards the end of the PC version. The team were doing several all-nighters. These guys were passionate and ready to kill themselves to get it right. With the Darth Revan twist, James Olin said, "We looked at a lot of the movies that have come out recently with great twists. M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense and Fight Club were two movies that we watched and saw and how they developed a twist and made the game grand reveal. And one of the lessons we learned which allowed us to make a good twist was that 10% of the audience needs to figure out your twist before it happens. Otherwise, you're not giving enough clues and the twist will come across as forced and false. You have to actually give enough clues that when you finally make the reveal, everyone is like, oh, that totally makes sense. It all comes together. I should have seen that." Drew Karpyshyn even mentioned Sixth Sense was his inspiration. And Michael Gallo also says that we also had plans for Knights of the Republic 2 before we gave it over to Obsidian, and I remember one of the storylines, Olin says. In trying to think of a twist that would be powerful because it was going to be hard to top the Darth Revan twist, one of the ideas is, what if we made the villain the most unlikely person to be the villain? What we wanted to do was take the Yoda race, which we had one in the Knights of the Republic game, and have the main character in Knights of the Republic 2 be trained by a member of that race. And that would be his mentor and quest giver, and eventually the most trusted person in the galaxy. Then halfway through the game, it wouldn't have been revealed that the Yoda figure was actually not a member of the light side, and had actually been training the player for evil purposes. Basically, the twist was, holy crap, Yoda's evil, but Obsidian went with their own story and eventually took that same story plot. Funny how that works. James Olin mentioned that Dave Filoni has gone on record saying how he enjoyed taking some of the vehicles and items from the Old Republic era and putting them in his Rebel series. Rogue One took the Hammerhead ship from KOTOR into its movie in one of the dumbest moments in the film.
Call up a Hammerhead Corvette. I have an idea.
Corvette 5, locked on target.
Prepare for impact. Sublight thrusters, full power. Reverse engines, full power.
So LucasArts let Drew Karpyshyn and the other creators with their creative freedom. Combat flowed through the fight choreography and animations. And the first playable demo BioWare showed the press at E3 in 2001 was very different from what KOTOR would become in 2003. According to Michael Gallo, producer of KOTOR, it was built in a different engine. Demoed Tatooine and Terrace, and every critic behind closed doors agreed it was great. In the original version of the crawl, BioWare had set the game 1,000 generations before the original, and it was a direct callback to Kenobi's famous monologue about the Jedi. Licensing rejected it outright as it was too nebulous and wanted a concrete number, which makes sense. Apparently the biggest battle with LucasArts was over the various lightsaber colors that would be allowed in the game, and limited to 3 colors at first, and set so many rules, but in the end it was 8. Pushback against limitations eventually got the okay. Having extra options would give players a sense of personal style and become a significant part of the game's legacy. BioWare had made it clear that the initial plans was to launch the game in late 2002, but due to performance issues and people wondering how the hell it was supposed to play this, they delayed the game till next year, and boy did it pay off. That's something to keep in mind for new developers out there with like Cyberpunk and shit. Delay the fucking game to make it fucking work, and you're gonna have success. But you didn't want to do that, you wanted to make the profits, and you're suffering over it, and you're gonna be losing money. And those are all the notes, spoiler notes, that I wanted to mention. A lot of interesting stuff, I must say. But if you are interested in reading this yourself, I would recommend this. It's definitely worth reading. I'll put a link in the description, as I mentioned before. If you're a huge Knights of the Republic fan, you gotta read this to understand the creation of this. I kind of gave you pretty much everything, but there are other things that are worth reading for that I didn't mention at all. So I mentioned the important stuff that I found really fucking interesting, but I would recommend you give this one a read and check this out. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to please like this video, comment down below, tell me what you think of Knights of the Republic as a whole. What's your experience with Knights of the Republic? And subscribe to my channel, Django Fett, if you haven't already. I'll see you, my fellow Mandalorian brothers and sisters, next time. Oh, yeah!